Okay, thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. I have a quick and easy scene here. It's very full, and it's based around my two aspen trees and some different types of foliage below. I wanted to do a scene that, I don't know, I wanted a scene that takes me back to kind of hiking through an aspen grove in Colorado once. Now, I didn't do these all in just straight yellow. I wanted to go with something a little bit darker so they'd show up in here because we're not working with light in a scene, we're working with contrast. So I made these trees look like they're kind of not fully turned, in their fall coloration, just all yellow. But I wanted to, kind of come up with some sort of visual here that kind of reminds me of backlit fall yellow aspen trees, okay? And to me, it looked like, living stained glass that I was walking through when I was hiking out in Rocky Mountain National Park, or maybe it was Estes Park. I don't know if Estes Park is in Rocky Mountain National Park. I think it's right on the outskirts of it. But anyway, I found that to be quite beautiful, and I haven't walked, in Southern California you don't get, you know, fall colors very often, and unless you're in something place very specific. But out in Maine and places like that, walking through like Acadia National Park, I love walking through underneath a canopy of backlit fall colors. It's just amazing. It's living stained glass, and that is quite special in terms of visual. And I just wanted to come up with something that kind of is reminiscent of that. And this is what I came up with. Some other things I can do too. I need a much stronger yellow gel pen. I can add in some leaves down here at the base, and that would be kind of fun. But adding these lights in here, these beams of light coming through there, are really kind of fun to do in something like this. So when I was doing these beams in some of the previous videos, I thought, oh, I need to do that backlit fall color composition that I've been thinking about doing. I don't know, I wasn't necessarily thinking about these images in particular, but those ones worked out rather well, being that they're aspen trees. You can do it with any types of trees. You can do it with the shagbark hickories work really well for that. But anyways, that's my first attempt with that, and a certain type of look. If you choose to watch the video, I hope you enjoy it, and drop us a note if you have any questions on it. Okay, I'm going to try and come up with a scene here that depicts a spectacular visual that I've seen before in Rocky Mountain National Park. And I've seen fall foliage elsewhere, but I don't know, I don't think I've hiked through a grove of, or I had hiked through a grove of trees or aspens that were in full spring, fall color, with that golden yellow. And I needed a fresh pen for that, okay? My number 5 yellow was kind of dry. It's probably been sitting around, having not been used for 10 years, so I reconstituted it. Well, not just reconstituted, I completely re-inked it with my number 5 re-inker, okay? Now, if it's Marvy Matchables re-inker fluid for a certain pen, the reason why it's called Matchables is because it matches the coinciding number for the brush markers, and probably La Plumes and all that as well. Marvy has that numbering system. Okay, now I've gone in and I've added browns and some greens to this stamp here. I restarted the video because I didn't want you have to wait around for me to look for this Marvy yellow, and I was looking for my re-inkers, and it seems like that was the last one that I found. So there was like 3, I don't know, minute of silence, which is forever if you're just kind of watching a video and nothing's happening. So I just restarted that, and let's see, I have plenty of pen in this, so remember that there's a lot of other colors in this. I just kind of scribble it around like this, like I'm doing with this one, and that's how I come up with my colors. And I want to do this scene because that kind of method that I've been using lately with the Colorbox ink to represent light beams. I thought that would be interesting on something like this, coming through the branches. I want it backlit, and that's the whole kind of visual that I see in my head when I think about Aspens. I love that that look that they can achieve. To me, when I was hiking through these aspens, it really could be any fall foliage and fall color if you're walking underneath them, and you know there's light behind it. To me, it just, the idea of a living stained glass really comes to mind. Just the beautiful colors. I've kind of seen that in Acadia National Park before too. Okay, now this one doesn't have quite so much yellow, so let me go for another one that has more yellow in it. But I do like the variation in this one right here. Okay, so we'll say, I don't know, sometimes some trees are, you know, they start changing at different times, even if they're kind of in, you know, similar, you know, within the vicinity of each other. So that one has a little bit of, or a lot of, let's say that brown, green that I used in there. I used, did I use some of that? I can't remember now. Let's go to the light green, okay? Okay, just coloring up my leaves of foliage, okay? Some of that. That's going to be quite a bit, I know. So let me see. Where's my pen that I just re-inked? One of these pens is re-inked and one of them isn't. Okay, let me try to take off more of that color that I applied as a foundation. This is how I used to do a lot of the coloring at A Stamp in the Hand for the labels that we used to use there on a certain style of stamp they had, where it had a kind of a colored label on it that was kind of hand indexed, but we switched over to these colored lasers when that technology entered the market, so we wouldn't have to do each stamp didn't have to be a hand colored label that was kind of prone to fading as well, because they're dye-based inks are just that way. So if it's sitting on top of a store shelf for a long time, you know, you don't want this kind of faded out looking product. So anyways, I spent a lot of time doing those master sheets for that project to take over to Kinko's copies and have them printed up. Okay. Maybe I'll stamp this one a little bit higher in the composition, just for a little bit of variation. You know, when you're stamping out the same image, it's good to kind of vary things a little bit. Okay, perfect. All right, so we get that variation like that. And that's what happens when you work dark to light with pens. It varies the color scheme without looking streaky. If you went light to dark and then you applied color on, like, you know, like I was doing, you might see those streaks of the darker color. Okay, let me see now. Here, I have the smaller one too. I was thinking about doing something like that in the background. Yeah, let's do that. Maybe I won't have the trunks in this one, so... Okay. Kind of follows it. Now, coloring stamps this way, I mean, it takes a little bit longer at times, but one of the things about this is that when you're done coloring it and you stamp it out, you don't have to color anymore. The color is inherently in the impression, so you know, you can't beat that. Okay, and I went for a little bit more of an olive on that one. I'm thinking about not stamping the trunks out so it kind of blends in a little bit. Is this my dry one, or I think that's my dry one. I have two number 5 pens here. Number 5 yellow, for those that don't know the Marvy color code convention. Okay, I'm going to mask off right here and get hopefully a background looking tree. Maybe where I see it's going to kind of merge into these other ones, maybe I'll blot off some ink. Okay. It'll merge into them a little bit, but this will kind of soften that transition. Because I do want it to appear as though it's in back of these two larger versions, okay? See, something like that. This looks like bushes or something like of that sort. One thing I was mentioning on a recent video was I liked this visual that I saw in Maine, in Acadia National Park, and that was all the low-lying kind of hedges and younger trees and bushes. Those all had you know, a fall color scheme as well, like little tiny bushes, you know. So I thought that was really cool. So I try to add that type of thing into my scenes when I do it. Now I'm doing this again. I just need a little portion of this right here, because I'm going to stamp out this portion down here. There's another bush on the side. Okay, like that. Okay. Look at this right here. Isn't that crazy? People get ideas, and when they see things like this on my demo table, they said, "Yeah, you can probably do something with that." You know, the wheels are churning at those conventions. You know, with all those so many creative people out there in an atmosphere. You know, creativity. Yeah, at conventions, you know, we're talking about, I don't know, however many thousand people that spend their pastimes creating things, you know. It's, I don't know, I think there's a certain energy you can kind of feel in those situations. Okay, adding a little bit more here. I want this to look full, okay? And I want it to be varied. So that's kind of the idea that I'm going for here. You know, you see these grove of trees, and you know, if it's natural, there's, you know, it's pretty filled in these settings, so You know, unless it's something, you know, in someone's, you know, landscape or something where they've planted it, you know, you're going to get that kind of full look. Okay, now I'm going to put one in between here, but let's do it in a little bit of a lighter tone. So let's switch up. Let's use more of the, just my light green, and I'll just use yellow. Okay. Remember, landscape stamping, scenic stamping, things are nice and easy and not complicated if you if you make the process that way. I'm just stamping over things. I mean, I stamp that first, and I stamp something over the top of it, blot off the edges a little bit, and everything will merge in with one another. Sometimes it looks kind of weird, you know, until you start bringing in some extra tones into it. But by and large, you know, it's one of the, I don't know, like most forgiving forms of stamping because of all the overlapping and merging of imagery that you get, merging of colors, you know, there's different things you can do. See, that's kind of lighter back there. All right, and see, I just stamped it right over the top of it because it was lighter, and I dried it off a little bit. This tree still looks like it's in front of it, so we have all this multi-layering going on, which is really fun. And I think it looks, you know, I think it looks really nice that way. Maybe I'll stop right there with the layering. There probably is a point that, you know, there becomes a little bit too much, but it's not like there's this precarious kind of tolerance where, you know, if you add a little bit more, oh my gosh, that was way too much, you know. I mean, if I added like 5 more trees in here, maybe. I mean, I can even add kind of a darker one here in the foreground, which would be kind of interesting to to complement this. I think I might have to do that now that I said that, because that might look really good. Do I do it in this image, though? Or do I do it in a different image? Maybe a kind of a leafless tree or something like that. But I don't know, that might look really good. Like if I did this in dark brown. I don't know if that would make sense, though. I don't know. I shouldn't ask that question because, you know, I don't think things have to make sense when it comes to stamping. The thing that it has to do, hopefully, it doesn't have to make sense, it just has to look good. Okay, this is the Sedge filler. I'm giving this these trees a foundation, okay? And I stamped it in brown. Okay. So then I just stamped it right over the top of it. I don't see a bunch of sedge filler in here or in here. You can't see it, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to stamp it right over the top. Boy, I'm still thinking about that foreground, and if I want it in there, I can stamp a smaller tree, like that. Like it's in the shadows. I don't know. Maybe another scene in the future. I think that would look really good, though. But I just don't think there would be it wouldn't be so dark here. I do need some darker elements in here. I think it'd be quite dramatic. We'll see. Let's start on the coloring here, though. Let's do a nice crystalline blue sky in there, and I'll have the light coming from the background. I can also do a sun, which maybe I'll do. I'm not sure. It can also just be tone, is what I'm getting at here. Let's try the Memento Bahama Blue. Or do I go Summer Sky? Oh, let me go Summer Sky here. It's a little bit lighter. Okay. Now, you use that technique where you just wipe off the edge. Okay, I'm wiping off a good inch into the scene, half inch or so. And I'll stamp it out coming from behind some of these trees. Like about like that. That's going to just provide me a little bit of a guideline. That didn't stamp out blue. I must have stamped it out in brown or something like that before I not cleaned it off. But it doesn't matter. It was fairly light, and I get the gist of it in there, okay? So, comes to show you, I'll use blues on it though. Comes to show you it doesn't even matter in this situation here. It's kind of a guideline for my light rays to come. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to start adding in some tone to the scene. Let's start off with a little bit of a blue. And I'm going with blue. I mean, you can go with any kind of colors. There could be kind of a sunrise or sunset type of thing going on in here. But I think I want to go with a little bit of blue, just as a little bit of a kind of a different hue for the sky, just for a change in, well, I guess a change in hue, just for some variation, I guess, is what I'm looking for. This is Summer Sky. It's a very, very light blue. If you ever start using something like this and you start sponging it in, it's going to look like nothing is being applied. Some people think their pad is dry. It really is not. You just have to keep applying it until you can see it, okay? Now that's not a bad trait for that to have, okay? Because when things apply slower, okay, it means there's a greater tolerance for error, okay? You can see things develop slowly, you can see if you like it or not. If I went like that and it was just like, that color of blue right here, you couldn't really do too much about it, okay? But when things are kind of coming into focus very slowly and, somewhat methodically, there's a lot of control over it, okay? Now this is a Bahama blue. It's kind of a medium tone blue. I'm going to be a little bit more careful about the rate at which I apply it. Okay, now I am just putting it right over the top of the trees. I'm not having to mask off any trees or something like that. If I get some blue into them, so be it, Okay, now I'm around my sun, so I'm going to be very careful, and I'm going to blend that out, or blend it in, blending it in and blending it out, okay? And I'm being careful not to stamp out my sun, okay? In this case, the sun barely shows up at all in terms of the form, but I can see it there, and it will be my kind of guide and my kind of a point of my light source, I guess you can say. Okay, now, one of the things I should have done with that blue up here is I should have, and I could do now, I'm going to bring some of this Summer Sky down into my floor here, my sedge filler, my grassy floor, okay? And I'll add some greens to it down there as well, or browns or whatever, fall maybe, okay? But I do that for continuity. Having that blue somewhere else is a good idea. Okay, now this is a pale orange, okay? It's kind of like it's my version of my light brown. I tell you what, a lot of you have distress inks. Let's try a walnut stain here. Okay. And the walnut stain will be going right over the top of that light blue. Walnut stain and light blue, in theory, they don't sound like they're kind of suited for each other, right? But if you stamp something light enough in terms of value, you can mix just about any colors you want to, and they mix together just fine. Okay, but it's just that blue in this base here just provides a nice foundation. Okay, a cool foundation to go with whatever other colors you place on the top of it. Alright, now if you have something like a green, you can use a distress green, any other color green that you want to. This one happens to be the yellow green from Marvy. Okay. I'm grabbing it because it's handy. Handy in terms it was right there it's right here on top of my desk, okay? And what I'm doing here is I'm starting to look at some opportunities for some shadows here. I have these trees that I placed down here. They almost look more like bushes. Maybe they're little saplings or something like that growing. Let's go with a little bit of a darker green down here. Okay. If you have a darker brown, you can use that. Okay, and I'm going to start to develop my shadows down here a touch. Okay. Oh, let's go back to brown. We'll use that down there. Okay, my tree trunks and on some of these trees, it'd be a good idea to use that same type of color. I can streak this in here if I want to a little bit. Yeah, this is just for a little varied type of mark. Okay. Something like that. And let's go to a little bit of dark brown, okay? I'm kind of using this like this on the tip there, and I'm just kind of free-forming it in, blending it in a little bit. It blends very nicely now that I have kind of a foundation of the other colors, okay? I'm not doing this on a dry piece of paper, okay? This down here is kind of wet with some ink right now, so it really blends out nicely. And I have that foundation of the other kind of more slippery colors, the thicker colors like the Memento, okay? Go for a little bit of background variation. There's some shade in the back, or in the front, or in the, I guess in the distance and in the foreground right here. Okay. Now let's add in, I don't know if I'm going to add in some of the other stronger, bold trees like that, but I think I do want some other type of foreground elements in here, and I really like this winter brush stamp. It's a little bit small for this block here. Let's go with a little bit of a larger block. I need like an intermediate block, but this will do. Let me put this one up here just to balance this off so when I stamp it, it's not rocking and getting on my tack and peel surface here. Black. Let's go with black here. Okay. That's what it needed. It needed kind of that nice foundation here. And contrast. See how nice that looks right there in a dark color. So you can see the difference between this side and this side. It's nice and kind of spindly. We get that nice texture without obscuring kind of what's going on in the background. And I love a lot of texture in my scenes. I think it makes them look more full and, I don't know, just from a textural standpoint, nice and rich. Speaking of that, we have these tiny rock stamp. This is one of my favorite stamps. This one and the larger one. I like all my stamps, of course, but the ones that tend to get the most amount of usage are the ones that are the most universal. You know, if I'm stamping palm trees, I enjoy doing that, but I don't know if I would have a palm tree in this scene right here. It's not that universal. Okay, it's going to be specifically for that type of scenery. Okay, now see this one right here, I'm just placing this down here, and it's kind of like a little bit of an anchor, okay? There's this foundation down there, and it makes it more interesting. It's giving me something crisp in an otherwise kind of a muted area, okay? When I add down a lot of texture and color sometimes, it looks rich with color, but we need that kind of object in sharp focus in that area, and that's what those little pebbles are doing, okay? Or those little rocks or whatever you want to call them, right? And for me, that makes it look like it is a scene in that area. It is not out of focus. Okay. I'm debating, as I'm doing this, I'm debating on whether or not to go a little bit darker in my corners, and I think I will. Okay. I do have these light beams that I'm going to introduce into here, and I want those to be fairly dramatic. So I'm going to take, and I'm going this with a Danube blue. It's kind of a navy blue if you have something like that in your collection. Usually people have, I don't know, 2 or 3 values of blue in their collection. It's a very basic color to have, right? I like what I see here in this scene so far. It's a much lighter scene than what I usually get to. I'm not going to make this too much darker. I'm going to put a little bit of this blue down here. It doesn't read as blue though, because we have the colors underneath it, but again, it brings a little bit of that continuity into the scene that we might not otherwise have without it. So it's one of those subtle little things that I do. I go 4 corners with my darker tones. Okay. All right. Some people have mentioned that if you're old enough to remember him, Bob Ross, some say that watching these scenes being created kind of, I don't know if it reminds them of Bob Ross, but it takes them back. But the word happy scene comes to mind when I look at this one right here. It's kind of a happy little scene. Hopefully it stays happy, you know, the more I add to it. Now for me, the thing that I'm going for, I think this scene looks pretty cool as is, like that. There's a lot of variation and whatnot. But I want to do that fun effect of adding this light beam effect coming, light rays, I guess, light beam, light rays, I guess it's the same thing, into the scene. And this is just, you can kind of guess if you're a regular viewer of these videos that I'm quite enamored with this look here. I'm into effective and easy applications, and this is a way to, I think, quite effectively and easily add a new element to the scene. Like that, okay? There's one beam. We can add a much larger beam, perhaps. Okay. But maybe it will be not quite as... This is the thing that I'm learning here. I was kind of adding a very even beam, but I think when you're doing this, when you're creating this beam here, like that, okay, I'm going to add a little bit more on one side of it, maybe. I think I like going with the top. Okay, so there's more paint kind of towards the sun. Okay, I call it paint. It's really, you know, it's dye-based ink, but I mean pigment ink. It's pigment ink, but it's almost like you're adding paint, right? Pigment ink is kind of like paint. Okay, so there's a varied beam. Okay, now before, like I said, I was kind of doing this whole thing. It was uniform. Can you see that there? See that right there? How it kind of dissipates like that. And there's a little bit more on one side. I think that looks really good. And it looks, I don't know, a little bit more natural, I guess. I tell you what, let's do something, let's play around with this. Let's say that this beam right here that I'm creating is in back of this tree, but in front of this one, okay? So, you know, the sunbeams can be kind of a what's the word? Not intertwining, but I don't know what the word would be, but it's kind of finding its way in different areas within the grove of trees. Okay, something like that. See that right there? It's kind of coming from back here, and this one's here, and coming back there. If you don't like that, then you can just kind of continue it on, but I do like that. I find it to be quite striking, I guess, you know, this kind of look. And it doesn't have to be too... Now, the Colorbox frost white is kind of a translucent white, okay? It's not super opaque like some of them, okay? Some of you maybe want the opacity, right? But on this one, for my purpose, having it not quite so opaque is serving my purpose quite well. Okay. There we have that. Okay, see that? Okay, now let's do it over here on this side. Let's say this, I like the idea of this kind of being blocking out some of those rays, okay? But I like the idea of it coming in here. So let's find a ray. Or we're not looking for a ray, I guess we're defining it, right? Wait a minute, where'd the other tree go? There we go. Okay, coming from behind this one right here, so it's down here, I'm not doing it up here. I'll put a little bit of that pigment ink on that, but not too much. When I say that, I mean that part of the tree that's in front of the beam, okay? And this other part of the tree is in back of the beam, so we see the beam. Okay, like right there. See that? Isn't that? It's coming out nice. I do get a kick out of kind of some new and different looks to the stamps. Okay, let me do a half beam right here. Okay, let's just do like where it's kind of spilling out from behind there a little bit, like so. Okay. I'm just using one side as a little straight edge right here. Okay. We have that. Okay. We can put another one up here. Maybe I'll just do a little hint of one. Like that. I'm going to give a little bit of a stronger definition to that beam there. Same thing with this one. You can kind of go back and alter your beams if you want to. I'm giving a little bit more opacity. Sometimes I find this ink dries a little bit darker, so you can go back in and just kind of reiterate what you've done with a little bit of a stronger or thicker coating of ink, if you wish. Okay, like that. See right here. Okay, and I like the idea of another beam down this way, I think. I'll have it coming through these bushes right here, or saplings or whatever. I don't know if it's not really a sapling, it's a little bit larger than that, but in comparison to the larger ones, I guess. What I'm finding is that this is a very, very, very forgiving look right here. You can kind of do whatever and it looks pretty good. I just have, I just keep my same focal point right there. Maybe another one coming out here. I don't know, maybe we can get into a situation where there's just too much, maybe too, but if you don't like something, you just kind of wipe it off. If you're working on glossy cardstock, okay? Now, if you're working on matte cardstock, this, this paint kind of sticks a little bit more firmly, and it's kind of hard to alter it. Okay? Now, what I like too is the trees around that light source. I'm going to kind of dab a good amount of this paint on some of these trees to make them look a little bit more illuminated by the light, okay? Now, a lot of times I use kind of a cotton swab for that purpose, but I'm just going to use this tip here, and if it gets on a larger region, that's fine, because this area is fairly light, okay? Alright. See that? It's kind of fun, isn't it? Alright. I'm wondering, I want another one over here. I go for a little bit more kind of balance. If you hear that tapping in the background, I apologize for that. That's my son practicing his drums on a practice pad, though. Okay, let's see. Let's do this right here. let's have a beam coming from behind this tree over the front of these bushes. Okay, like that. How about like this too? Let's put a real faint one down and see what that looks like. Huh, okay, there we go. Something like that. I'm trying to decide if there's any other areas that I want, or if I want to alter any of it. This one looks a little bit too light for me, so I'm going to kind of obscure that one a little bit. And something like that, I think, looks pretty good. Let's put a little bit of this mist down at the base here. Some of these trees, perhaps. There's kind of a fresh, bright look to this, I would say. Let's go on with some pens here. Okay. Now some things being illuminated down at the base here. It's a way to add in that kind of crisp little effect. Okay. And then, of course, leaves being illuminated. I need to get myself a bright yellow gel pen, and I'll do that soon. I was looking up some pen types, and I didn't realize how many different colors of Uniball. This is a Uniball Signo pen. I didn't realize how many colors were out there. Like there's like 3 shades of, or 3 values of blue in the gel. I mean, I was aware of things like light blue, but I didn't know there were 3 values of it. And then there's those glitter ones, and you know, all the different thicknesses of them. 0.5, I think, 0.7s. This one's a 1.0. So this one's the thicker one. And then I wasn't aware of like the different opacities for a lot of types and brands out there. I was looking at the Jet Pens video on them, a gel pen comparison video. So I am all into gel pens, you know, provided they work. There were some pens early on, you know, in the day when these things were coming out, and boy, I tell you, maddening. Some of them didn't work when they were brand new, or like the whole brands didn't seem to. They were pretty consistent in terms of not working brand new, so that was really quite frustrating. You don't want to buy a bunch of things and have them not work. So I don't know if they did product testing or what, but anyway. That being said, these days, there should be a lot of pens that are really fantastic. I had a really good experience with all of my Uniball ones. Okay, but anyways, I'm adding a lot of these little highlights around. Will you please focus? Why aren't you focusing? Here we go. Right around in here, and where the beam meets, you know, it goes in front of these trees right in here, like maybe that. I'll put a few more highlights, like it's hitting some of that area a little bit more, okay? So you can just use your beam as a little bit of a guide and, you know, put a few more highlights across that area where the beam is kind of overlapping it. In a scene like this one, you can really quite, you know, do whatever, and it looks pretty good from what I'm finding so far. Okay, this one's a peach Sharpie paint pen. Love these Sharpie paint pens, they work really good. It's kind of goes along with the spirit of this color scheme that I have here, but it's a way to go back in and you know, add variation and lightness and texture. And with all the colors that are working in here, it fits in with that very well. Anyway, but going back to that whole idea of the stained glass and light hitting it and aspens, one of these days I'll make it back to Colorado or another area. There used to be a bunch of groves of aspen in Southern California, but at one point in time they had this kind of ecosystem program up in the mountains where they planted a bunch of beaver. Because beavers, you know, they create great ecosystems for all kinds of other wildlife and such, but what happened was they, you know, like beaver do, they, you know, they ate up, you know, and chopped down all the aspen trees, so there's like one grove of them up in this area, kind of the Big Bear type of area of Southern California. And I checked it out once. It was pretty cool. It's like a aspen grove trail, they call it, because there's so few aspen trails. That one's designated as the Aspen Grove Trail. So anyways, kind of a fun type of application of the trees here, and here we have a little bit of an aspen grove, kind of not fully turned to yellow quite yet, but rich in tone and values, and then adding these beams across it kind of adds that extra little dramatic, I think, element into the scene and changes the spirit of it somewhat. It really kind of draws you into the light. We have a nice textured base here, but otherwise a pretty simple scene to do. A lot of the colors came in the impressions themselves. You just have to color up those stamps there and make those impressions. No masking involved with doing the additional forms around the initial larger ones, okay? And I just colored this one up for certain portions that I wanted, blotted off the edges a little bit, and stamped what I needed, and that really filled out my scene, even the background one in here. Alright, and then the thing that I couldn't wait to get to, which was the light rays coming through there, so just a huge amount of fun doing that, and quite effective as far as, I don't know, a look or a feel to the scene, you know, by adding in those beams. So I used to just kind of add a little bit of pigment ink around on the edges here to kind of soften the edges and to make it, you know, look like kind of glowing light, you know, but when you add that actual beam in there, it almost becomes a whole separate character, like another image, you might say. And it's certainly quick and easy to do, so you can add as many or as few as you want, have some beams coming in front of your objects and have some beams going in back of it, and that gives it a real kind of extra dimension in terms of the layering of depth within your scene. So fun stuff when you can have something that's not an object represent depth, you know, just in the form of kind of a visual light, I guess you can say. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the scene. Thanks for watching. Check out Stampscapes.com if you have any questions in our information section, or you can drop us a note in the comment section below if you have any questions or comments on this.